Hey nerds, and welcome to Flash, Theories and Conspiracies. I'm Brian from Good Nerd, Bad Nerd. So we finally are back with the season premiere of Flash after Barry left us going off into the Speed Force, and the episode picks up about 6 months later. That's about the time jump that Supergirl also had, and it's just like Supergirl, it's been grieving week for the CW. Iris is trying to deal with it in the way she thinks best, and she's just moving forward and kind of ignoring what happened to Barry, and she's not grieving for him. At the same time, she's not really allowing herself to move on, and understandably, it's a very difficult thing because she doesn't know where he is, if he's dead, what's happening to him in the Speed Force. So it's a tough thing for her. But all in all, a lot of cool stuff in this first episode back for season 4. The samurai, the flying samurai, while I felt its abilities were a bit overpowered compared to a speedster, it was very cool and a great way of introducing the villain for this season, the Thinker. But before we get into kind of the big characters that were introduced and mentioned in this episode, let's just talk really quick about Barry and what we saw from him in relation to his time in the Speed Force and how he is when he comes out. So Barry's time in the Speed Force, we don't know if he experienced it in real time or in kind of some exaggerated time. And this is something that the team doesn't know. Was it 6 months for him? Was it thousands of years? Was it no time? Was it all time? We don't really get a good idea, but the impression that I get is since the Speed Force really does exist outside of time, Barry was experiencing all time at once. Some of the things he was saying were clearly things from the past, but it felt like he was also saying stuff from the future. And when he came out of the Speed Force, his mind was still trying to process all that. And that's not really something that the mind of a normal person is supposed to be able to contain. So that's what I think was going on. This house is bitchin'. I think that's going to be something that comes up later on. I think we are going to find out what all that writing really does mean. But we'll see. It's it's possible that what Barry has there is going to be similar to like their time vault, and it's going to be glimpses of things from the future. And once they figure out actually how to decode it, they're going to kind of almost like that time vault with the newspaper clipping of Flash disappearing. That's I think what all that writing is going to turn into. Now, the one issue I really did have with this was the facial hair on Barry. Either he shouldn't have had any, or he should have been really grizzled. But I mean, that was like a month's worth of facial hair growth, not 6 months, not years. I get that they wanted to show him in a kind of a frazzled, mentally unbalanced state, and just like in the old Star Trek, the best way to show someone was changed or evil was facial hair. This is the best way to show that Barry is not all there. So, all that being said, let's jump into kind of the stuff, the really big stuff from this episode. And we're going to start with Caitlin and the figures in that bar. So Caitlin is found working in a bar, and Cisco goes there to get her help. And we get some names and we meet some characters that are actually pretty important to DC Comics and Flash, and specifically to the Thinker. The guy we see kind of lurking around with the white eye has the name Norvac. And I'm going to talk about him a little bit later before we get to the Thinker, because he's much more related to the Thinker than he is to the person that he is allegedly working for at the bar. The person in charge at the bar goes by the name of Amonette, and in the comics, her name is Amonette Black, aka the Blacksmith. As the Blacksmith, she has the ability to kind of manipulate metal and merge it and manipulate it with flesh. She got this ability by drinking an elixir that she stole from her, I want to say husband or partner at the time, Goldface. She did this and then used these abilities to take over the underworld, a black market called the Network. And the Network was the black market between Keystone City and Central City, Flash's home and the Arrow's home. So she was a very important and powerful crime boss, so she's definitely going to come into play. We already know she's actually been cast by Katie Sackhoff, so we will be seeing her. At the moment, she's only in one episode, but I think she's kind of a big, important character, so it seems likely that we will be seeing her more frequently, especially when you cast someone like Katie Sackhoff in that role. You want that character to keep coming back. And that seems very, very likely. Now, at one point, Blacksmith did actually take over the two cities. She had formed her own group of rogues, and with their help, she took over, but the rogues being, not as cohesive as the original rogues, through infighting, Blacksmith lost it and lost control and was finally defeated. But that's Blacksmith. That's who this Amunet character was that was referenced in the bar. Next, Norvac. Norvac is really a minor character in the comics, but he's integral in the origin of the Thinker. He was a crime boss that the original Thinker, Clifford DeVoe, before he became the Thinker, was trying to press charges, and he had him up in trial because Clifford DeVoe was a DA at the time, but he couldn't actually land the prosecution, and it really destroyed Clifford DeVoe's abilities, or at least his abilities to function as a DA. So after that trial, he approached he approached Norvac and offered to work as a Thinker, someone who would come up with fake IDs, false identification, aliases, alibis, things like this. And he was immediately put on in the job. Now, eventually, Norvac got suspicious that DeVoe wanted to take over, and through his own failures and just kind of paranoia, did himself in and killed himself, and it was ruled as a suicide. And at that time, Norvac was the head crime boss in the area. Well, with the gap in power, all the other crime bosses came together and actually voted to have DeVoe take over as the head crime boss because he was so smart, his technology was so good, and he was just kind of in charge. He was the brains behind it, and that's when he took on the identity of the Thinker. Now, the Thinker is constantly gaining new technology and making his own technology, and the most important thing he has ever created is the thinking cap, and it's allowed him to shoot kind of like mental blast kind of things. But the problem is it eventually gave him terminal cancer, and he did die from this. Now, since you can never let a good villain die, the Mr. Terrific actually took the brain patterns of the Thinker and created an AI, thinking it would be able to help the Justice League. Well, the AI became sentient and created a hologram form and started working with the Injustice Society, and eventually betrayed the Justice League and at one point turned their base against them. He's done this a few times where he's challenged them, but every time he's defeated, and he just retreats to cyberspace. So he's in his artificial intelligence form. He's very difficult to defeat, and you can't really get rid of him permanently ever. So he's a really cool character, and it'll be really interesting to see how they use him. Based on how we saw him at the end of the episode, I think it's very likely that his physical health isn't great, and we could see him die and then come back as that artificial intelligence version. Now, his assistant, the mechanic, she's just kind of a minor character from the comics, but I'll get more to her in probably next week, just because we want to see more of her in the show before we kind of compare her to what she is in the comics. So, what did you guys think of the episode, guys? What did you think of the new costume? What did you think of the team? What did you think of Team Kid Flash or Team Vibe? All in all, are you excited for Season 4 and the less serious tone that they claim they're going with? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and check out everything I've got going on the website at goodnerdbadnerd.com. So until next week, I'm Brian from Good Nerd Bad Nerd, and this has been Flash, Theories, and Conspiracies.